Hmm. Hi, everybody. I'm here, but my camera seems to be giving me a bit of trouble. So until that eases, please be a little patient. Thank you. Hi, Rob. Hi, Dale. Hmm. Okay, thank you for waiting. I'm going to clean up the camera problem now. There it is. Let's hope it's not going to go away now since the stream has started in earnest, and I hope that things will just stay where they are. Anyway, there's a lot of campaign news tonight and a lot of things that are going on, so I thought that I would cover it. I see that my hope that things would be stable with the camera right now has not come to fruition, so I'll have to do something else here. Thank you for waiting. There it goes again. Hopefully, this will be the last time tonight. He said, hopefully. Okay, there it is. Uh, Again, hopefully, keeping my fingers crossed and hoping you keep yours crossed as well. So there was a lot of campaign news. And the campaign news is, well, Steve Bullock, the former Montana governor, has dropped out of the race. Also, but Kamala Harris has dropped out of the race um, as well. And someone else who had been around for some time, whose name escapes me just now, but who was a minor candidate, has also given up the ghost and dropped out of the race because he was not catching fire uh, at all. So the ranks of the hopefuls are now thinning. There was a morning consult poll which appeared this morning, in which this was discussed at length on the Hill by Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty. And I'm going to shift my view a bit here now. Okay, and go to a link. I'm not going to play the YouTube here, but I am going to show the screen. This was a morning console poll done from November 25th to December 1st, 2019. It has a margin of error of plus or minus 4%. Oh, that assumes that they're sampling the population correctly. If the sampling model is no good, then that's all out the window, of course. So there's no telling. But they have more people in their poll, okay, than many other polls have. And so over the long run, they should be very good in picking up the trends. What Crystal Ball saw in this poll when she looked at it is, first of all, that Joe Biden was now at 25% among the early primary state voters. And this was a poll, okay, of primary state voters. Bernie Sanders was at 20%. So the way she saw it was that Joe Biden, okay, and also Bernie Sanders were in the top tier. And they now, according to Crystal, were the only ones in the top tier. Because Mayor Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren were down there at 13% and 12%, but far away from Bernie. There seemed to be a noticeable break in the polling between where Bernie was and where Buttigieg, okay, and Warren were. And since Kamala Harris had also dropped out of the race, it seemed like a new situation to Crystal. And she argued that she didn't think Pete had any staying power, simply because she thought it was not really possible for him to do very well on Super Tuesday. And it wasn't possible for him to do very well in the Nevada primary and the South Carolina primary. She allowed as he might do very well in Iowa, okay, and in the New Hampshire primary, the white bread states, as it were. That's my term in this case. Okay, not hers, but of course he's known as the white bread candidate. So she basically thought he wouldn't do very well after the first two, and that he would begin to fall. And she thinks Warren has been very severely damaged by the Medicare for All fiasco she went through, and that this sort of cast her in the role of a candidate who was very inauthentic, because to all intents and purposes, by proposing a Medicare for All solution, which was going to require two separate bills at two different times, uh, okay, it seemed to Crystal that Warren was confessing to us all that she wasn't really for Medicare for All. And I think that's a reasonable conclusion to draw. It's a reasonable conclusion to draw as well, that Warren is seen now as not having presented herself in an authentic way. Whereas with Joe Biden, while he may have all kinds of gaffes and he may be doing all kinds of crazy things and saying all kinds of crazy things, people do trust him to be Joe Biden and stick with his positions. So they view him as telling them the truth about where he stands, even though, of course, he may not be telling the truth when it comes to characterizing the positions, okay, of other people. Still, people have the feeling, she thinks, that they know where Joe Biden stands. And of course, they also know where Bernie Sanders stands. And so these are coming across, as of the moment, as the two most authentic candidates. Then she sees some of the other candidates as having little chance. Harris, of course, okay, has now dropped out already because she did not want her name on the California ballot, and she was approaching the deadline where she had to declare whether she was really going to be in the primary, in the presidential primary, or not. And she evidently decided that to do very poorly in the California primary would reflect extremely badly on her as a candidate for the Senate. So she didn't want to jeopardize her Senate seat down the line sometime with a poor showing. And so she decided to pack it in, which I think was a wise decision on her part. And now the Kamala Slayer, Tulsi Gabbard, is still hanging in there, okay, at 4%. She has run a modest campaign. She doesn't spend a huge amount, okay, of money. She does not go beyond her fundraising, as far as I can tell. She's a judicious candidate, and she's been gaining lately showings of 4% and 5% and such, showings that she has never had before in the campaign when it comes to all of the early states. So now the top tier candidate is not only not a top tier candidate, she's not a candidate any longer at all. She's suspending her campaign. And the lower tier candidate, who was hardly worth even talking to, is now still hanging in at 4%, and her support, okay, is growing. And she still has a couple of months to run until the Iowa primary, And at this point, who knows how she'll do? But we can speculate. So later on in the program, not in her segment where she was claiming we were seeing, okay, a polarization of the race, people basically deciding whether to go to Biden, okay, or whether to go to Bernie. In later discussions, she took notice of the fact that, whoa, there was Tom Steyer with 9% in this poll. So, she did not say that the margin between Buttigieg and Steyer is only 4 points, where the margin between Biden and Sanders is actually 5 points. So the question you have to ask is, do Buttigieg and Warren and Steyer now constitute a grouping by themselves, a second-tier grouping by themselves, where they may basically be fighting for the same group of supporters and perhaps are not contending at all in relation to the groups that are supporters of Bernie, okay, or by Joe Biden. I think that might be a possibility. Steyer has come into the campaign and, of course, has bought his way in terms of having a presence because he spent just a huge amount of money, okay, on ads. But the basic point about Steyer is, completely apart from the fact that he's a billionaire, he's also a person who one might characterize in the previous lexicon as a little bit center left. Okay, he's someone who's been very firm on wanting to seek to solve, okay, our climate emergency problems, and is one who recognizes that, okay, it is an emergency. On the other hand, when it comes to Medicare for all, he's not for it. He's not a Medicare for all candidate. He seems to be a candidate who, though he doesn't say so, would be somewhere in the fiscal responsibility arena, what I call actually the faux fiscal responsibility arena. And he's also someone who's against the corruption and who I suspect, in fact, I know that he's against the role of money in politics and would like to do something about it, even though, of course, without his money, he'd be nowhere in politics right now himself. Of course, he also made a name for himself by heading up a small movement to impeach Trump. And in fact, I have one of his sweatshirts, the Need to Impeach sweatshirt, which is quite a cute thing. But Steyer seems like a sincere person. I'm not saying that he's not. But when the Need to Impeach movement didn't give any evidence that it was going to be successful in impeaching Trump, at that point he decided he was going to jump into the presidential race himself. And that's when he did, and he started spending a fortune on media. And this and his personality and his ads have gotten him up to 9% in the Morning Consult poll, which is one of the better polls out there. Okay. So the question I'm raising is, will there be a three-corner fight for a particular segment of slightly center to left of center Democrats, with the three corners being Buttigieg and Warren and Steyer. Will there be a triangular war between these three? Or is one of them going to break out and begin to approach the top tier? At this point, I don't know. There's already a lot of negative press which is going to Buttigieg. I'm not sure he's really on the rise anymore. Warren's fall to 12%, okay, in this poll, and her sinking in a number of other polls too, certainly makes the case that she's no longer in second place, that it's Bernie who now is firmly in second place, and that she has slipped into a lower tier. Now, I cannot say whether Tulsi is going to get really, really hot in New Hampshire, okay, and Iowa, which could give her a boost into some of the other states, especially the western states, on Super Tuesday, where she's spent some time and where people know her. But she remains the candidate firmly against the foreign policy of the United States, firmly against the interventions that we see all over the world. Now, as the campaign has gone on, we see that Bernie is starting to reveal himself as someone who was also against them, and Tulsi's presence in the race has certainly helped with Bernie having more freedom to say that. And so he's beginning to express himself in that way. So that part of the population who wants to see an end to all of the interventions, to all of the regime change wars, now have two candidates, essentially Bernie and also Tulsi. And the question is, can Tulsi continue to gain when Bernie is beginning to publicly state in strong terms his opposition to the regime change wars? Warren, Steyer, okay, and Buttigieg seem to share, as far as we know, foreign policy views. They seem to have rather conventional foreign policy views in line with the foreign policy establishment. In that respect, they're not distinguishable from Joe Biden. So if Joe Biden continues to falter, then it's possible that one or more of these three candidates will begin to make some more progress towards the top tier. I think that if one of Warren's problems is that she's no longer viewed as entirely authentic with respect to her positions, I think Mayor Buttigieg has the same problem, okay, or a similar problem. There's enough already out there that when people get to know Buttigieg, get to read about him, okay, and get to hear about him, I don't think he's going to come across as an authentic candidate. I don't think he's going to come across as someone of whom one can say we know where he stands. Because certainly, the point is going to be made again and again that when he started this campaign in January of 2019, he was firmly in the Medicare for All camp. And then he decided that maybe he wasn't going to do so well in that camp. So he, along with Harris and before Warren, retreated to a public option type of a position. In fact, a position which is very similar to Joe Biden's. And Biden, I guess, is currently accusing Buttigieg of stealing his health care plan. So there's going to be an argument over these two, I guess, between these two about which plan is Buttigieg and which, is Biden's, and how they differ on this. Now, Tom Steyer hasn't been as explicit about the plan that he favors, but it's pretty clear from his website that he's not a Medicare for all person. And I don't think Warren's going to say much about her Medicare for all plans from here on in. I'm afraid she's going to think that she'll put her foot in her mouth again, and that she's probably going to want to steer clear of trouble on that score. So when it came to Medicare for all, it was Bernie who turned out to be the far better politician as opposed to Warren. So, are we seeing a polarization here around Joe Biden at one end and Bernie Sanders at the other? The reason why I don't think so is because I think that the real polarization we're seeing is between the centrist candidates who don't want to go too far and the revolution candidate, specifically Bernie Sanders. But maybe Tulsi Gabbard will make it clear as she goes forward that she is in the Sanders, the revolution camp. In other words, the camp that actually believes that we need a reorganization of our whole political system, that we need to create and maintain a movement to bring definitive change to the political system. I think Warren has made some moves towards paying lip service to that, but I think anybody can see she's not really for that. What she wants to do is to negotiate with the other elites that are part of the establishment and bring them along with her program, but that she's not about to cast her lot with a democratic mass movement. She's not about to go where Bernie has gone. So I think we can see clearly now that she's not the Bernie copy that she perhaps started off the race at trying to become. She has failed in creating that image now. Now she has, I think, the image as a centrist person who's a little left of center, who's interested in doing some good things for you, maybe, if she can get them through the Congress. She might even fight hard to get some of the good things that she wants to get through, but she won't be riding a popular wave during her presidency to fight off the Republicans, to fight off the conservative Democrats, and to change the country. That seems to be pretty clear from her campaign so far, that she's not going to go where Bernie has gone. Now, the same is true for Buttigieg. And I think the same is true for Steyer, though Steyer has been vague enough about some of his positions that he may yet decide to throw caution to the winds and try to cast his lot with a mass movement of some kind. But if he does that, he has the problem that he's a billionaire, and the other problem that He doesn't have a mass movement behind him as yet. He has a very good mailing list. But as the leader of a mass movement, he's not near as compelling as the poor boy from Brooklyn, who politically has made it to the top. Steyer has economically made it to the top, but not through being a champion for the little guy and a champion for the rest of us. He's not shown that he's in the not me, us camp. And I don't think he's going to be able to show that. Now, when we look at this, though, when we look at these polls, we see that there's 25% in the Biden camp. There's 13%, in the Buttigieg camp. 12% is in the Warren camp. And 9% is in the Steyer camp. That's 59%. 59% of the primary state voters who are for one centrist or the other. And assuming that Tulsi can't be called a centrist, only 24% is in the revolution camp at this time. Now, this is far from a decisive analysis, because when you ask people what their second choice is in the campaign, Bernie does extremely well with the Biden supporters, and he does extremely well with the Warren supporters. So he can pick up a lot of supporters from those two groups if the others fade. So that leads to the question, how much can Bernie pick up? Can he pick up enough from the other people to win in the primary, and to get enough of to get a sufficient a number of delegates in order to avoid a second round at the convention? To win outright in the first round and thus avoid the intervention of the superdelegates, which is likely to give the nomination to somebody else. That's the question we have to ask ourselves, at this point. And in light of that question, we also have to ask, what will be the impact? What will be the impact of the entrance into the race of Mr. Michael Bloomberg? That we don't know as yet. But there was a Harris X poll which appeared a couple of days ago. It's the Hill's own poll. The Hill Harris X poll. And the sample size on this one was very small in terms of the Democrats' sample size and the independents leaning towards the Democrats. That sample size was only 437. It says the margin of error was about 3.1%, but I don't think I trust that because Oh yeah, it was Tom Sestak. I'm sorry, Joe Sestak, who stepped out of the race for the presidency. He's a Democrat from Pennsylvania who used to be a congressman. Okay, he's a retired admiral, and he got no traction at all. Okay, in the race. Uh, okay, now this was a national survey, and it had 1,000 people in it, which is good numbers for a national survey. But when you get to break down the survey into subgroups, the margin for error is far greater. And when you're making generalizations about the Democrats and the subgroups, you're only talking about 437 people nationwide. So it seems to me the margin of error is far greater there. Anyway, the polls showed that Joe Biden was still squarely in first place with 31%. Bernie had 15%. You should be seeing that up on your screen now. Let me check, make sure you are. You are, yes. Warren was at 10%. She had lost 5. Bernie had lost 3. Okay. But also Buttigieg gained 2, so he was up to 9%. And Michael Bloomberg, with the huge ad buy he just made, I think he made it something like, I don't know, just a huge ad buy when he came into the race. And of course, he has virtually an unlimited amount, okay, of money. He can pay for the whole presidential race by himself for both parties, and it would hardly scratch the surface of his net worth, which currently is estimated at $52 billion. So, the plutocrat threw his hat into the ring, spent a whole bunch of money on the first ads, had a big blast. He's up to 6%. Harris lost 2% and was down to 2% in the Harris X poll. Yang is at 2%. Tulsi is nowhere in that poll. Amy Klobuchar gained 1. She's at 2%. Julian Castro is still at 2%, no change. And Steyer was only at 2% in that poll. So in the early state poll for the Morning Consult, he's at 9%, but in the Harris X poll, he was only, at 2%. He had gained 1. 13% were unsure, though, in that particular poll. So there are some Harris votes that are up for grabs now that she has dropped out. Okay, and Bloomberg can be counted on, I think, to surge a little over the next month as people see his ads and respond to his ads. But there's going to be a lot of negatives coming his way as well, especially from us. In other words, especially from the progressives. Also, it'll be easy for Bernie Sanders to attack him. I don't think he'll hesitate, to attack him. I mean, he's wanted to be nice to Biden, and to Warren, and he might be some qualms about hitting out, okay, at Pete. But I don't think he has any qualms at all when it comes to Bloomberg. He doesn't think that Bloomberg should be in the race, but he thinks that Bloomberg gives him a perfect foil. And I think he'll be constantly calling attention to Bloomberg's being in the race and advocating for things that won't really help the people, that nobody wants. And he'll be talking about how dangerous it is to have plutocrats, to have people high up in the oligarchy, such as Bloomberg, being in a position to run for the presidency and to possibly become the president of the United States. And Bernie will be constantly contrasting himself with Bloomberg and with Trump and grouping Bloomberg in with Trump. So there'll be a lot of negative static. But Bloomberg has a lot of money, and I wouldn't be surprised to find him growing from 6 to 10%. One thing we can be pretty sure of, though, and that is he's not going to be taking any votes away from Bernie. But what he will be doing is he may be picking up some of the Kamala votes. He will be competing for votes. What did I say? There was 59% in the morning consult poll between Joe Biden and Buttigieg and Warren and Steyer. He'll be competing. If we throw in the 4% from Harris, that's 63%. He'll be competing for a big share of that 63% of the vote reflected in the morning consult poll. Now, there's one thing I have to say here, and that is that Bloomberg is not going to be a factor in the early primary states because he's not really running in the early primary states. He's going to be devoting most of his efforts to Super Tuesday, trying to make a big dent in California, trying to make a big dent in the numerous other Super Tuesday states. And he's going to be trying to do this through using the media. He won't be playing retail politics much. He probably won't be doing large rallies. He's going to focus on using his media in order to try to influence things. Given the political orientations he has, he's probably going to come out with a very aggressive type of climate program. I wouldn't be surprised to see that from him. When it comes to Medicare for all, though, he won't be for it. When it comes to deficit spending, he's going to be very much against it. He's going to be for doing things more deliberately and more slowly. He's not going to recognize the very real crises we face. He probably won't be ambiguous about what he stands for. He probably won't play it cute. He's probably going to come in and say his positions are very similar to Joe Biden. And he may not be as nice a guy as Joe Biden, but you can know where he stands. And you can also know that for his whole career, he's demonstrated that he's a very good manager. So if you want a very good manager in the presidency, and someone who's pretty centrist, He's your guy. Now, how does Mayor Pete compare? Well, Mayor Pete is very bright, but it's going to be hard for Mayor Pete to contend that he's brighter than Bloomberg, who on the surface is a pretty bright guy who's met with huge success in business that he did not inherit. It's going to be hard for someone whose main political experience has been as the mayor of a city of 100,000 to compete with someone whose main political experience has been as the mayor of the largest city of close to 8 million people in the United States. It's going to be hard for Mayor Pete to stack up his managerial expertise against Bloomberg's managerial expertise. So I see Bloomberg as hitting Biden pretty hard because he'll basically present an image to people as, hey, I'm a better version of Joe Biden. I'm not a gaffe machine. I don't think slowly. I haven't been saying the exact same things for 40 years. I got a whole group of really competent people behind me that I hired. And I'm a great manager. Joe Biden has never proven that he's a good manager of anything. And he's going to say, and I think he is, I'm also just a little younger than Joe Biden. I'm not even sure he is younger than Joe Biden. Haven't recently checked his age. He is in his 70s, though. That's certainly true. Okay. He's another old guy. I think he can lay claim to a lot of Joe Biden's support, but not Joe Biden's working class support. Joe Biden's more establishment support. So as Bloomberg hits at Joe Biden, what happens to Joe Biden? I think the electability argument for Joe Biden is then very severely hurt. Then I think a good many of Joe Biden's supporters are likely to migrate to Bernie Sanders at that point as Bloomberg starts to hurt at Joe Biden. So we may see Bernie's support going up to 25 to 30% in polls, and Biden's going down to 15 or 16%. I also see Bloomberg as taking support away from Buttigieg and taking support away from Steyer, because I don't see what Steyer offers that Bloomberg is not going to offer. Now, maybe Steyer will be more aggressive on the climate emergency, but I don't see any foreign policy differences between Bloomberg and Steyer. I don't see any foreign policy differences with respect to Buttigieg. I don't see how Buttigieg can distinguish himself in a favorable way from Bloomberg. So I think Buttigieg is very vulnerable to Bloomberg. I think Biden is very vulnerable to Bloomberg for part of his support, but not for that working class support that seems to stick with Joe. But I think a lot of that working class support sticking with Joe is based on the electability idea and the idea that Joe served Obama, who for some reason was popular with a lot of the working class. So I think Bloomberg's entrance into the race is likely to signal a pretty rapid collapse of Joe Biden, so that by the middle of January, we will probably see Joe Biden down to single digits. And we won't be hearing much about the electability argument anymore, at least in reference to a comparison of Biden and Sanders. We may see an alternative electability argument which arises where Bloomberg claims he's the electable one, especially by comparison with that dirty socialist Bernie. He may get some stuff like that. Now, I think that Warren support I'm not sure that Warren is going to fall any further. Maybe when Bernie's electability starts to rise even higher, as Bernie gains from the Biden collapse, then Bernie's electability may seem to be a very attractive argument, to many people. And so some of the progressives who maybe preferred Warren because they thought she was the more electable of the two candidates may drift over to Bernie. But I think there are a lot of people sticking with Warren because she's the female candidate in the race and because they like her stances when it comes to corruption and getting money out of politics, and thinks that she's very sincere about that. And also, I think a number of people happen to belong to the group that is probably not completely dissatisfied with their health insurance, so they might not be too bothered by the fact that Warren is going to postpone passing a Medicare for All bill for 3 years or more. So basically, what I'm guessing at is I think Warren will lose some of her support. Some of the progressives who now support her will drift over to Bernie, on electability grounds. So maybe we'll see a shrinkage to the high single digits, for Warren. But I think, Buttigieg is going to be severely hurt. Steyer is going to be severely hurt. So I think that that Bloomberg has potential to rise to 15 to 20% of the polls over the next few months before Super Tuesday. Whereas we may see Bernie rise if he does well in the early state primaries, the 4 early state primaries, which I think will happen. We may see Bernie rise to 35%, in his polling. Biden shrink to single digits, Warren shrink to single digits, Buttigieg go back to single digits. But they still might have between them, where they now have 50% of the vote, they might still have between them, let's say, 25% of the vote. Sorry. They still might have maybe 25% of the vote. So we may still see a split vote if they continue to hang in there. If Warren continues to hang in there and Biden continues to hang in there, of course, there's a chance that Joe Biden may drop out when he hits the single digits. And when Bloomberg passes him in the polling, which I think is likely to happen. At that point, the big donors may just say, oh, to hell with it. We're not going to give any more money to Joe. And I think soon after that, then maybe Joe Biden is going to withdraw from the race. Maybe even before Iowa, throwing a lot of his votes to Bernie, but maybe strengthening Warren at that point too. But I think we might very well see a situation where 15 to 20% of the vote is still going uh, to Biden, okay, or Buttigieg, or Warren, or Steyer, or some combination, okay, of them, okay, including maybe 4% Harris. So maybe between 15 to 20% of the vote, if we look at what's there now. Okay, maybe 35%, okay, to Bernie. That's maybe 55%. Uh, maybe 15 to 20% to Bloomberg. So we may start finding a polarization between Bernie and we may start seeing, okay, a Bernie, okay, and Bloomberg type, okay, of polarization rather than a Biden, okay, and Bloomberg type, okay, of polarization. When Warren will drop out, I don't know. If she drops out, and people may be trying to keep her in there as a block Bernie sort of move, but in the end, she might not sit still for that, especially if she falls into single digits. So if she comes out of the first round of primaries with little gain, okay, in donors and shrinking to single digits, she may at that point simply pack it in and throw her support up to Bernie. At that point, we could very well see Bernie polling at 40 to 45%. Now, I know I haven't come close to 100% yet. I've been talking roughly projecting something like 75%. Uh, I don't know where the other 25%, okay, is going to go. I think that's going to depend on what happens in the campaign. A big unknown is the impact that the time off for impeachment is going to have on Bernie, okay, and Warren when they have to stay in the Senate and sit there and not campaign in the early states. With Bloomberg coming on strong with a huge ad campaign, and Steyer trying to defend himself because I don't know what he offers, okay, that Bloomberg, okay, does not offer, and they're both just blanketing the airwaves with ads, okay, in those early states. Except that, wait, I take that back because I don't think Bloomberg is going to waste his money in Iowa and New Hampshire. I think he's decided it's too late for him in those races and that he's just concentrating on Super Tuesday. So maybe Steyer can do well under those circumstances, but I don't think any move by him would last for very long then, even if he did well in the early primary states. So that's what I think is happening. No Bernie Biden polarization, but there is an our revolution versus everybody else polarization that I think we're really seeing. I think that Bloomberg's entry into the race is going to accelerate the polarization, hurt Biden, okay, and Buttigieg, and maybe Steyer very seriously, hurt Warren somewhat, not hurt Bernie at all. So to summarize, I think Bernie is going to gain 10 to 15 points during this process. And that assumes that Warren stays in the race. So I think there's room here, since I've only counted to 75%. There's obviously room here for Tulsi to grow. And I think she can grow if she does well in Iowa, and if she does well in the New Hampshire primary. I don't think she's going to do very well in South Carolina, but she may do very well in the Nevada primary. When I say very well, comparatively speaking, in other words, showing bigger poll numbers than here, maybe breaking double digits even. If she gets there in those early primaries, based on her performance in the December debate, okay, let's say, based on her retail campaigning, which I think she's very good at, then she could pick up some of that 25% of the vote that I think is still available from people who are unsure. And she may rise into double digits, okay, at this point. But when Warren drops out, and I think she'll be hurt enough by having that extra person in the center left sort of group, I think she'll be hurt enough that she's going to shrink into single digits again. I think that Buttigieg is going to be in single digits. Steyer may remain in single digits and not grow any further. Uh, but I think, okay, that Bloomberg is probably going to get to as high as 15%. I don't know why I feel that way, but I'm just going over in my mind what these various people are offering from a policy perspective and from a meme type of a perspective. And I'm trying to measure that against the unlimited amount of ad money that Bloomberg will have. And I think that he can rise to 15% by the time the primaries start. And going into Super Tuesday, he may be at 15%, even not having participated in the primaries. Anyway, this remains to be seen. Okay, I'm going to stop it here and go to your comments. Okay. Lana, I said 15% for Bloomberg. Not 50%, 15%. Well, contrary to what you're seeing on some of these screens, I think my camera is working. Even though it might be showing it. Here we are. Let me verify. I think you're still seeing me. Well, from where I'm sitting, you're still seeing me. I said 15%, Lana. I didn't say 50. Okay, comments. Rob asks, how you doing? I'm doing fine, Rob. How you doing? And Rebecca McClaskey says, hello, Joe. Hello, Rebecca. Dale says, hey, Rob. Rebecca, hi, Doc. Bonnie says, hi, everyone. Dale says, good evening, Ms. Bonnie. Rob says, hello, Bonnie. Kay says, if so, I believe Bernie will win if the DNC lets it be an honest primary this time. Well, they'll try to rig it, but I'm looking for them to try to rig it most plainly when they get to the convention. That they're going to try to rig it by playing the superdelegate game if they can get to the second round. Dale says the winnowing has begun. Kay says no big loss so far, in my opinion. Laugh out loud. Steve says, hi, Doc. Kay says if the DNC was the centrist on the ballot, well, the worst thing is that not only they will get the orange idiot again, we will get the orange idiot again. That's the worst thing. They'll be giving the orange idiot to us. And if they do that again, then let's be clear, folks. They deserve to die as a party. We should, at that point, reject any participation with them, and simply, en masse, go over to the Greens or the Movement for People's Party. Because these people are corrupt. The leadership of this party is simply bankrupt. You've seen, okay, in the last week, okay, are you aware that there's a labor union bill in the House that in effect would repeal right to work? That has 215 co-sponsors in the caucus. And Pelosi is pigeonholing the bill, refusing to bring it to the floor, and instead wants to bring Trump's trade bill to the floor instead, because she thinks it's a win for her if the successor to NAFTA gets passed. That successor has no labor enforcement provisions in it. It has no environmental enforcement provisions in it. It extends protections for pharmaceutical monopolies, extends protections for their patents. It's still a bill for the rich that hurts everybody else. And like the TPP, it deserves to be defeated it deserves to be defeated. Now, the labor unions have signaled they're going to sell out. They're going to sell out on that bill. Okay, if they get some provision that gives them the ability to enforce the labor rules, but through the agreement. In other words, the labor rules get enforced. So the frickin' big unions will sell out if their rules get enforced, but won't do anything to protect us all against the climate change and to stop the corporations from blocking climate change. What this is going to cause is, if that bill does pass at this point, what it's going to cause is that in the first week of his administration, Bernie is going to have to declare that he's getting us out of the MCA. He's going to have to say, no dice, this is a stinky trade bill. I'm getting us out of it right now. Okay, I will do a new agreement, but that agreement is going to insulate domestic climate change policy, labor enforcement rules, and also patent rules from this treaty. The multinational corporations are not going to be able to use this treaty to sue if they have any grievances. They have to go through the national courts. Steve says Tulsi needs to be in the debate, but the DNC is blocking her polls. Yeah, I know, and I agree she needs to be in the debate. I think eventually she'll make it. It's only December 3rd. There's still time. Kay says, I didn't like Biden before, voted to screw college kids and to cut Social Security a few times too. Yeah, and there's the crime bill. There was the crime bill. Okay, and there was the confirmation of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court refusing to take the testimony of other women that he had sexually harassed, which would have blocked him from the Supreme Court. So we've been stuck since that time, since 1988, with one of the most conservative justices, one of the most reactionary justices on the Supreme Court since that time, because Biden didn't have the guts to reject him too. Didn't have the guts. The crime bill was terrible, though. He was a supporter of the Iraq War. I mean, his record is terrible on so many things. Everywhere you turn, it's terrible. And then he has the Obama record, too. Of course, too many people still think that was a good record. But everything he did in the Obama administration was terrible as well. Oh, by the way, please share, like, and subscribe this when it goes up, okay, on YouTube, and please share as widely as you can here. Horton heard of who? What's that? Replying to K. Well, L. Stephen Day, I'm done with it. Have done my whole adult life, and I'm now 66. Over it. So what are you over? Oh, I see. But they will ask, I am no longer buying the blue no matter who crap, and millions of others aren't either. I held my nose and voted for Clinton last time, but will either write in Bernie if I can or not vote for president this time if they screw Bernie again. He's this country's last chance for a real equal country. He may be this country's last chance for actual survival as a civilization. It's that bad. It is that bad. Remember, if we don't get the climate emergency under control, we're done for. And nobody else is serious enough about it. And Stephen Day says California matters this time, joining the Super Tuesday states on March 3rd. Absolutely. Tom Steyer is positioning for a Senate run against Kamala and will probably kill her career. Could happen to a nicer girl. And Steve says, I think Tulsi will keep rising. They wanted to block her from the debates. Yes, I think that she'll keep rising too and that she'll stop them. I think she'll be in December. Again, I did say 15%. Steve says, Horton heard of who? Well, I'm done with it. I've done it my whole life. I'm now 66. I'm over it. Now that you're 66, I'm sure you're also for Social Security expansion. There's only one candidate who's really squarely behind Social Security expansion, and you know who that is. And Rebecca McClaskey says mass civil disobedience. Yeah, it's long overdue. It's long overdue. Doc, if they play the superdelegates game again, the Democratic Party will die. I think it will. But also, Steve, if they play the superdelegates game again, it's we who have to kill it. We've sat still for new progressives to say, oh, the easiest way to do this is to take over the party and to run as Democrats. I'm talking about Ocasio Cortez, and Omar, okay, and Rashida Tlaib, Ro Khanna, Jayapal, Pocan, the other real progressives who have continued to run as Democrats. They're afraid to step out and join either the People's Party or the Green Party. If the Democratic Party plays the superdelegates again, I think this party has to die. That's all there is to it. And we have to kill it. Nancy is sitting on it. She's sitting on it. Right. She's sitting on it, and she's pushing Trump's trade bill. Lana says, I agree. No more superdelegates. We need a list of the superdelegates. We do. Somewhere there is a list of the superdelegates. Google. I bet you Daily Cost has a list of the superdelegates. Kay says, I like a People's Party idea. Well, there is the movement for a People's Party now, and you can join it and be part of that organization, which is the seedbed for the People's Party. Kay says, I'd like a People's Party. Pelosi needs to go too, but she is against the New Deal, the Green New Deal too. Yeah, she is. Shahed Buttar to take her out. We need to support his campaign. She needs to lose KNSF. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've all got to contribute to Shahed's campaign and make sure he is very well funded. Stephen Day says, may be true. Yangubi? Yangubi? And Bloomberg, if poor people have money, they will buy sodas. As long as they only buy club soda, that's fine. Yeah, if poor people have money, they will buy sodas. Yeah, that's what he did in New York. He wanted to get people off sodas. Kay says that is exactly right, Mr. Firestone. Last chance. Thank you, Kay. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Last minute. Please share, like, and subscribe. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. And thank you very much for that. Any last minute comments or questions? It looks like my image is frozen again for some reason. I do not know why. It also looks blurred. Oh, I got a bunch of hearts for something I said. I don't know what it was. Okay, so thank you all. I'll hang around for another minute longer. Thank you all for coming. I will be here tomorrow night with more good stuff. I've been working on some stuff, some more stuff on the climate emergency, and in specifically the just transition aspect. And also on some other stuff as well. So please hang in here with me. Thank you, Steve. Yes, I really enjoyed it. So have a good note. Have a good night, everybody. And I'll see you tomorrow night, probably for some climate emergency and the just transition, unless something really intervenes. Good night. Good night.